The consensus narrative is fixated on the wrong threat. Analysts model a kinetic exchange with Iran, calculating the impact of a Hormuz closure on the oil crisis. This is a strategic distraction. A launch-on-warning scenario is a mathematical liability for all actors involved. The real vector is asymmetric, cheaper, and silent. The modern state is a data processing entity. Its power is not its military hardware, but the integrity of the data that commands it. CSIS reports confirm that adversarial nation-states possess the capability to sever undersea fiber optic cables, the arteries that carry 95% of global internet and financial data. CISA's own guidance highlights the systemic risk to our operational technology. The vulnerability is not theoretical, it is a documented liability. This is not about destruction, it is about inducing paralysis. By severing key data nodes or blinding satellite systems, an adversary can create a strategic condition we call the blind leviathan. A nation-state deprived of real-time market data, logistics intelligence, and command and control loses its coherence. It becomes a thrashing, panicked giant whose own complex systems turn against it. The adversary doesn't need to defeat the leviathan. It only needs to remove its eyes. To understand the motive, you must first understand the term solvency crisis, not as a corporate bankruptcy, but as a national security event. According to analysis from institutions like CSIS, a prolonged and unpopular kinetic war functions as a solvency crisis for the aggressor. It liquidates national treasure and political capital, creating a terminal domestic liability. This isn't theory. It is the mathematical blueprint observed in Russia's pivot away from costly conventional operations toward asymmetric warfare. This blueprint is not lost on Iran. The regime is already managing significant internal liabilities. Reports confirm its domestic protests have been smothered after a deadly crackdown. This is not a position of strength from which to launch a conventional, multi-trillion-dollar war against a superpower. For Tehran, a kinetic conflict is a non-starter. It would be a guaranteed, regime-ending solvency event. Weakness forces a pivot. When the cost of kinetic engagement is total self-destruction, the only rational strategy is to find a vector that inverts the cost equation. Asymmetric warfare is that vector. The strategic objective ceases to be capturing territory and becomes triggering a systemic solvency crisis within the United States itself. WION analysis underscores that avoiding a direct war is critical, confirming that the true battleground has already shifted. The motive, therefore, is survival. It is a launch-on-warning protocol triggered by domestic weakness and the mathematical certainty of conventional defeat. By targeting the politicized Federal Reserve and unsecured operational technology, as identified by the Financial Times and CISA respectively, an adversary can execute a national balance sheet attack. They are not trying to win our war. They are forcing us to lose our own peace. The kinetic cost curve has inverted. A report from the Royal United Services Institute, or USI, quantifies the shift with mathematical certainty. On one side, a $5 million main battle tank, a relic of symmetric state-on-state warfare. On the other, a $500 FPV drone. The delta is not merely financial. It represents a fundamental change in the economics of lethality. The return on investment for projecting force has collapsed. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for delivering a kinetic effect has been lowered from a nation-state's GDP to a credit card transaction. Manufacturing advanced weaponry required a massive industrial base. Manufacturing asymmetric threats requires a 3D printer and an online tutorial. This decentralization of force production removes the state's monopoly on high-impact violence. A regional actor like Iran no longer needs to build a fleet to challenge a superpower. The true vector for attack is not kinetic parity, it is systemic leverage. Why spend billions on an aircraft carrier when you can spend thousands to target the operational technology of a port, a pipeline, or a power grid? As guidance from CISA confirms, these OT systems are vulnerable. The objective is not to win a battle, but to trigger a solvency crisis. The blueprint has shifted from military attrition to financial contagion. The true staging ground for a systemic attack on the United States is not in the Persian Gulf. It is in the fractured infrastructure of developed, Western-aligned nations. The battlefield is a gray zone, a proxy laboratory where the mathematics of societal collapse can be tested and refined at near-zero kinetic cost. Analysts at RUSI confirm this model. An adversary like Iran, having successfully smothered internal dissent and stabilized its regime, per NPR reports, now pivots. They cannot afford a conventional, kinetic conflict. The WION analysis confirms this would be economically prohibitive. Their strategic imperative shifts to asymmetric leverage. Consider recent instability in a nation like South Africa or Canada. These are not isolated domestic crises. They are live-fire exercises in systemic disruption observed by hostile state actors. When a grid fails or a supply chain seizes, it generates a high-fidelity dataset on second- and third-order effects: financial panic, civil unrest, and political paralysis. This is not intelligence for its own sake. According to CSIS, this data forms the blueprint for an attack on the primary target. The vulnerabilities stress-tested in the proxy laboratory are then mapped directly onto America's self-inflicted liabilities. The insecure operational technology in our critical infrastructure, which CISA is issuing urgent warnings about, and the politicized central bank, whose crisis tools have been compromised, as noted by the Financial Times. The playbook is being tested offshore before it is deployed here. The central liability of nuclear deterrence is no longer the missile, it is the sensor. The protocol is known as launch on warning. Once early warning systems detect an incoming strategic asset, a countdown begins. The commander does not have the luxury of deliberation. They have minutes to execute a pre-authorized launch sequence or risk decapitation. The system is designed for speed, not nuance. This protocol is now the primary vector for asymmetric escalation. According to CSIS analyses, a targeted cyber attack on operational technology, the very systems CISA warns are vulnerable, can blind a radar network or inject false signatures. This creates the fog of digital war. Is the data real or a phantom? The commander is forced to launch out of fear, outsourcing the kinetic cost and existential blame. The adversary turns our own deterrent into the weapon. The mathematical endpoint of this liability vector is not a kinetic exchange. It is a calibration shot to test systemic fragility. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a coordinated, OT-level blackout targeting a strategic U.S. port, likely along the Gulf Coast, the nation's energy jugular. The event, lasting 48 to 72 hours, will be engineered to appear as a catastrophic but plausible system failure, leveraging known vulnerabilities CISA has already warned against. Attribution will be impossible by design. The objective is not physical destruction, it is data collection. The true metric of success for the adversary will be the spike in U.S. Treasury yields and the emergency liquidity response from a politically compromised Federal Reserve. This is not warfare, it is a solvency test conducted at our expense.